Hey, everybody. This is Dr. Tim and our social media coordinator, Hilary, for another Dr. Tim's Aquatics podcast. How you doing this morning, Hilary?
I am doing well. How about yourself?
Doing good. Nice sunny day out here in Southern California. There's no snow.
Be careful saying that. You might have a lot of people mad at you.
That's true. Apologize, folks. Sure, the weather's beautiful where everyone is today.
So today we're going to talk about gels. Now, if you guys have been following along on our social media, we've been kind of featuring our gels for, I guess, the whole past month. And I guess as the month is wrapping up, I figured it would just kind of be a good thing to talk about them on our podcast today because, you know, even though they've been out for several years, they are maybe newer to a lot of the hobbyists that are out there. So if you are familiar with the WasteAway liquid, which I feel like a lot of people are, we have a WasteAway time release gel that you can put in your tank that, I don't know, I think they're a lot easier, a lot less to think about, if that makes sense. Because you just have to put them in and they'll change color and let you know when it's time to swap them out. They do all of the work for you. So they're really, really great. You can put them in and almost, forget about them for a couple of weeks. So today we are going to talk all about the different gels that we have, how to use them, what are the advantages and disadvantages, and then I guess a little bit of troubleshooting and some of the questions that we've gotten from our followers on how to use them. So go ahead, I guess, tell us a little bit about why you created them, how they came about.
All right, so the gels are completely unique to Dr. Tim's Aquatics. There's nothing out there like them. And the whole idea was, well, just what you were talking about. People are busy and you need convenience. But technology can help us with that convenience. And what happens in most aquariums? They get dirty. They get cyano, they get dinos, all these things. And as I've been basically preaching for years, that's because the unintended consequence of all this filtration that we have is that we're eliminating the bacteria in the water. And you can throw as much chemical and light and all this stuff in the water, but if you don't have the right balance of bacteria in the water column, then what you're going to be doing is growing bacteria on surfaces. And usually those are bacteria we don't want. The system's out of balance. And while I have had some episodes of being Don Quixote fighting, the windmills, it's easier to go with the flow in terms of what could we develop where people wouldn't have to change their normal routine. And the fact is, the internet overwhelms all the good information. For as much good information there is out there, there's tons of bad information. And how do you fight that? So the idea was, okay, we know there's a lack of good bacteria because people overskim. I just had a guy, he's having cyanobacteria. You probably saw it on the info email. And I said, what type of skimmer? And he said, well, it's the proper size. Well, that doesn't tell me anything. In his opinion, it's a proper size. And it turns out, for his 200-gallon tank, he had a 600-gallon skimmer. That's typical. He's, overskimming. So people overskim and they throw everything at the system. They overskim, they put UV, they add refugia, this and that. And all these devices combine to really eliminate the bacteria in the water. And you can't get people to change that. It's very hard. And so the idea was we can have a dosing system. But the vast majority of people that have a saltwater or freshwater system don't want to have a dosing system. They just want a nice tank. So what could you do that was simple and easy? And that's where the gel idea came up, a slow release from a gel. Now, the problem technically is that most of the gel material out there, if you put it in the tank, it dissolves too. And these gels are natural substances and they're carbon, and that would just feed the bacteria also. And in the early test, it would just cause huge bacterial blooms and the tank would look cloudy. And so, well, this is making things even worse. It went from just having a clear tank with some cyanobacteria problems, maybe, to having a filthy, dirty, cloudy tank. So what are we going to do with that? So there were some real technical challenges. And that's one thing I want to point out at the beginning. When you add the gels cartridge, the holder, to your system, the gel is not going to dissolve. It may break up a little bit. That's why it's in the holder, but it will not dissolve. You have to pay attention to the color change over time, telling you when it is worn out.
And one good, I guess, recommendation for that is when you first put it in whatever light you're regularly looking at your tank at, or wherever you've placed that gel, go ahead and take a picture of it with your phone. We always have our phones out, and that way, over time, I mean, even if you're looking at it every day, you might not notice the change, but if you have a photo of it from day one in comparison to, week 3, you'll probably be able to see that change much easier over a larger period of time than you would day to day. If that makes sense.
Right. The freshwater gel is green. The marine gel, which is reef safe, it's for saltwater, reef tanks, seahorse tanks, any tank, saltwater. It is blue, and they are not going to turn to a pale brown white. They're going to get very, very light green, very, very light blue. And definitely that's a good suggestion, Hilary. Having that picture, oh, that's what it looked like, and this is what it is now, will tell you that it's time to change it out.
Yep. Now, let's go back, I guess. So obviously, WasteAway, the liquid, has been around for a while. Are there any cases where you would recommend using the liquid as opposed to the gel, or vice versa?
Well, they're really complementary to each other. So the idea is, yes, the liquid's been around for a while, and the way it works is, years ago, I isolated the 8 strains that make up WasteAway from aquarium systems. That's the whole key, as I said many times. We use bacteria from aquariums, not sewage treatment, not anything else, from fish systems. And those were isolated, and they're actually grown in a very industrialized, controlled process. And we grow a huge amount of the bacteria, and then we freeze dry them. That's why, like right now, people are worried, are my bacteria, the WasteAway bacteria, going to get ruined? Are they going to die because of this bad weather? And the answer is no. The WasteAway bacteria are completely different from the one and only. And the WasteAway bacteria can tolerate and survive just fine freezing, because after we produce them in these huge chemically controlled vats, we pour the liquid, centrifuge off the liquid, and then we end up with this paste of bacteria that is put in, I'll make it simple, cookie sheets on trays, and then they go into a freeze dryer. And the resulting product of WasteAway is actually a powder. But we don't want people messing with that powder, and that's why we reconstitute it in the liquid, so that it's much easier for the hobbyist to deliver and to handle. And you shake it up, and then you pour in the right amount. And those are spores. WasteAway bacteria form spores, unlike nitrifying bacteria. And what we can do then with that powder is we can put it in the gel. So now, to answer your question, if your tank is really dirty, really out of balance, lots of cyano, dino, whatever the situation is, lots of organics, we recommend starting with the liquid WasteAway, because it has a lot more bacteria per mil, and it will go out and attack the problem and rebalance your tank and clean it up. Then, to maintain it, to keep it in balance, you need a constant slow dose, 24/7 dose, and that's where the gel comes in. It is for maintenance. You put it in, and 24/7 for up to 30 days, it releases a little bit of bacteria that go out into the system and consume the nitrate and the phosphate and the organics and keep the system in balance. Because you don't want absolutely zero phosphate or zero nitrate. As I've said probably 10 times already in the last few minutes, you want a balance, and that's what we're trying to achieve here with the gel. So we even say this on the back of the instructions of the gel: clean it up with the liquid and then maintain it with the gel.
Yep, it's just like you do that one deep clean on your house, and then every week as you go along, you clean a little bit more just to make sure that it stays in good shape and looking nice and clean.
Right. And the philosophy behind this is that your skimmer's removing the bacteria. Sanjay did a paper presentation years ago that showed this using bacterial counts in aquariums. You turn on the skimmer and the bacterial count drops greatly. And as I said, these devices are removing the bacteria unintentionally. Well, the WasteAway is putting those bacteria back in, and you don't have to do anything. Like with the liquid, if you read the directions, please read the directions. We say add a little WasteAway. We always say start off slow. Every tank is different. We don't know how much organic nutrients you have in there. So start with a half a dose, a quarter dose, and turn off your skimmer. You don't want to pour it in and then have the skimmer remove the bacteria right away. So you pour the liquid in, let it mix around, and then 1 or 2 hours later, because the bacteria start dividing in 20 minutes, you turn the skimmer on. And what you're doing is letting the bacteria go out there, multiply, consume organics and other nutrients, and then turn the skimmer on and remove those bacteria. And then you just repeat that process. Well, go ahead.
I was gonna say, it's not gonna hurt your tank to not have your skimmer on. I think you were talking about it earlier at the beginning about how people are like, oh, hey, I've got a skimmer that's good for 600 gallons, but I've only got a 200-gallon tank. I think, we're always worried about like, oh, we have to have the best. We've got to have more than what we need. But that could actually cause issues in the long run because, again,
it definitely causes huge issues. I mean, when I first started out, we won't say how long ago, and the only skimmer out there was a Sanders skimmer, and living in San Diego, and you had to go look for it, and all this shit. You don't want a skimmer. Skimmers are worthless. What do you want to do? So it was, don't even use a skimmer.
Oh,
and then it went to, skim 5 times. The more skimming, the better, the bigger skimmer. And, they were all these space age. The water went 2 different directions and swirled around, and it got crazy. And what I tell people now is and the Europeans have learned this, a lot of advanced aquarists have learned this, is that overskimming is bad because it's removing not only the primary balance in the system, but what happens in the coral reef with all that bacteria in the water. Corals filter feed 24 hours a day. They're always pumping water. What is water full of in the ocean? Bacteria. What are bacteria made of? Food. Everything is food for something. And this is why people will say, my corals have gone brown, or, things aren't looking good. It's because the food you're feeding, you're removing all food. Yes, they like copepods and stuff, but those are French fries. What they want is nutrients which come via the bacteria in the water. So by putting your skimmer on a timer, what you allow the system to do, shut off the skimmer. The bacteria, as I said, multiply every 20 minutes. They're consuming nitrates and phosphates and organics, turning that into new bacterial cells. And the corals filter feed, especially at night, which is why I say turn the skimmer off at night for a few hours. And they're getting nutrition. And in just a few weeks, you will see your corals will have color. People have called or emailed and said, my corals are back. They look great. All I did was put it on a timer. Well, all you did was allow them to start getting nutrition from the water via the bacteria like they do naturally. So there's lots of side benefits to doing this technique. and adding a little bit of the WasteAway on a regular basis, which is what the gel does. Just primes the system to keep the bacteria levels up.
That's pretty cool. Like, just to think, like, you know, we've brought all of these organisms and created little ecosystems in our home. And then I know we've talked about this in previous podcasts, but we forget about how it actually works in the wild, and, you know, things that we've done just to make it so much better kind of takes away from how things naturally work. So it's always nice to retouch back on, you know, how things work out in nature.
Right. And that's, you know, what I, you know, a little bit pride myself on is I have that 1 foot into the marine biology world, but I have my bigger foot into the aquarium world because I've always been a hobbyist. So how can we make this easier? You see the emails, people email us all day long, Sino and Dino and this and these problems, and then it's a common theme. They're keeping the water too clean. Now, why do people keep the water too clean? Because human beings want to see the corals. We're not there to grow bacteria. I know that, folks. We're not there to grow bacteria. Dang it. We're there to grow bright corals and have fish and have this beautiful gin clear water in the system. And that's, you know, I know that. And that's why we did the gels. Let's not fight human nature. Let's use human nature. And so we developed a patented process on that gel to put the bacteria in. And what happens is when you put it in the system, and it can be anywhere, it can be in the sump, it can be in the tank itself, just where there's a little water flow. You don't need tons of water flow. This is all going to start working. The gel starts to absorb some water, and that pushes out the bacteria. And the bacteria go into this your tank, and with the water flow, they get spread all over, and they start doing their thing.
Yeah. So I'm glad you mentioned this, is proper placement of these things. And you kind of mentioned a second ago, not putting it in an area where there's a little bit of flow, but not a ton of flow. So you don't want to stick these things like right in front of your power, next to your power heads or your returns or anything like that. So put them in areas of low flow.
Yes. You don't need, again, we all think bigger's better, faster's better. Nope. Gels are going to work fine. So don't put it right where the pump is jetting out.
Yes. But
and
you do
also,
need a little bit of flow. Don't put it in somewhere where, I mean, hopefully there's nowhere that has a bunch of stagnant water. But
hopefully there's no dead part in your dead zones in your system. That's something you got to fix right away. Kind of on that topic, the other thing is, don't break it out of the cartridge. We've had that, you know, it comes in a plastic holder. It has holes on the sides. That was designed that way. And people say, this is really hard to get out of this holder. And I'm thinking, you mean the shrink wrap? Because it is shrink wrapped. You just peel, you have to remove the shrink wrap. It says remove on it. So take all that off. But it's like, the shrink wrap's not that hard. It's perforated. It should be pretty easy. And then I figured out, you're trying to rip the cartridge apart. No. Because as I said, if you just put the gel by itself in the system, and when we first trial ballooned this product, we didn't have it in this cartridge. We had it in kind of a tub where, you know, it would sit there somewhere. People were playing with it and moving it around, and the gel would break apart and it would get sucked into the pump intake. Because it doesn't dissolve, it would just make a mess. And so it's like back to drawing board and figure out what we have to do, because this is not going to work out. No. So, yeah, all our products we like to release to a small group of people to test. And because by the time we're ready, this is always in product development, and we've worked on it and we think we've thought about everything, but we've got enough experience to know we haven't. So we like to get people out there that can just say, okay, take this and use it. And what do you think? And then we get the horror stories back, like, why didn't we think about that? Yeah. So we got to fix that. We learned about that. So beta testing.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you're listening to this and you're not familiar with these gels, if you haven't seen them, if you haven't used them, go on our Facebook page, go on our Instagram page. Earlier this week and last week, I posted a couple of videos of like placing the gels in the tank. I also did a quick little video. I think somebody was laughing about this. It's like removing the little shrink wrap from it. Like, oh, hey, no, but it's like you said, people were trying to take them out of the casing. So we'll just make that, throw that up there. Hey, this is what you need to remove. That's all you have to remove. Once you got that gone, stick it in the tank and you're good.
Yeah, we actually sent samples to a store, and oh yeah, we're going to test them, and then didn't hear any back. A couple of months later, oh, they didn't work. What do you mean they didn't work? They never changed color. They didn't do a thing. I'm thinking, well, that doesn't make any sense. Can you snap a picture? Send it to me. Before he snapped a picture, he texted and said, oops, we didn't remove the shrink wrap. Sorry. He didn't want to send a picture that showed the system, the gel in the tank still in the shrink wrap. He just admitted, okay, we're going to start over again. So, there's a reason we put that sticker on there that says remove. It's not because we want an extra step in the manufacturing process. So,
yep. So it's interesting over time, like as you grow older and you realize like, oh, well, what seems obvious to me might not be obvious to everyone. So go ahead and put that on there.
Now, the other thing, and you may have questions on this, is once it's in the tank, one thing we get a lot about or comment about is it starts getting this film on the outside of the gel, this clear film. Yeah. And
oh yeah,
that's
one
freaks
of the big
people
questions
out.
we get asked.
Yeah. So look on the website. You'll see pictures of this. It's kind of a clear bulbous thing that looks like a blob. Well, that's the bacteria film. That is wonderful. That tells you it's working. And you've got a couple of things you can do. One, you can slowly remove the gel from the tank, wipe that off, and put the gel back. Or if you got corals, you can just wipe that off into the tank and the corals will eat it. Or if you've got a shrimp tank or invertebrates, they're going to eat it, because basically that's marine snow. That's just a high concentration of bacteria, which is food. So it's not a problem. It's not a deficit or defect or anything. It's actually showing you that it's working.
I've actually seen a few photos, and I think I've posted one of them of the I guess the growth that comes off and shrimp kind of hanging out around it, eating it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, the shrimp love it. Yeah, if you have a shrimp tank, they'll just be over there all the time eating that. And a couple of other troubleshooting, the sizing.
Yes, I was saying, you beat me to it. That's one of the things that I was going to bring up is the right size.
We first came out with the old packaging, and it was like, well, the small one is for tanks up to this, I think it was 15 gallons. The large one was 30, and the big one for 75. And then we wrote the words, can't be overdosed. Seemed perfectly clear. So we had one person take the 75-gallon gel and put it in a 5-gallon tank. And of course, it started releasing bacteria for a 75-gallon tank and clouded up, and she was upset. And I said, well, why did you use the 75-gallon in the 5? Well, it says can't be overdosed. And she wasn't wrong. It was just my thinking was that maybe people would understand that a 75-gallon gel would not go into a 5-gallon tank, but it wasn't clear. So we fixed that in the new packaging. So basically what we need people to do is pay attention. It does you no good to put the big one into a small tank. That it's going to release bacteria for a larger volume of water, and you can't overdose. So we've adjusted the mix a little bit, we've adjusted the sizes. So look on the gels. There's 3 different sizes, and use the gel that is rated for your size tank.
Yep. And again, if this is something that you're not familiar with, go to the Facebook page or go to the Instagram, look through our posts, because I've got a post there. It shows you where on the packaging to look for. In the bottom right-hand corner, it's going to tell you for up to a 100-gallon tank, or up to a 50-gallon tank, or up to a 10-gallon tank. So that's hopefully will take some of the guesswork out of it. If you guys are looking to put these in your tank, you'll know exactly which one of these that you need. And 2, when you buy these, say you have a couple of tanks, you can get the multi-packs of them. So it's got 2 for, you know, the 10-gallon tanks, or 2 for your extra large tanks.
Right. And then another question we get a lot is, okay, I like the gels, they're working, but I've got to dose my tank with a disease treatment, or I've got to do something and I want to take the gel out. That's fine. What you can do is take the gel out and just wrap it in a baggie. You don't have to have water in the baggie and don't have to keep the gel underwater. You just need to keep it from drying out. And it's perfectly fine to do that. Just wipe it down a little bit, have a little moisture in the baggie. You can even have a little wet paper towel in there, and then wrap it up and seal it and keep it in the dark. And it's fine that way while you're doing whatever you need to do to your system.
That's a good thing to note. Now, this is one of the questions that I've gotten, and maybe we can go over this, not just diatoms, but what sorts of things can people use the gels to treat? Somebody was asking specifically, do they treat diatoms? You know, what kinds of algae outbreaks will they take care of?
Well, the Diatom Phase that all new tanks get through, they're not going to treat that. I have not come up with a treatment for that. And like I said, if you're really trying to treat cyano or dino or treat something, I'd recommend using the liquid, because the liquid has a lot more bacteria, and it's basically there's a competition going on there. And if you come with the gel, which has very few bacteria that you want, versus cyano or dino that are just taking over your tank, it's going to be a long time before you start making any progress. Whereas if you came with the liquid, well, now you can overwhelm the cyano or dino. And that's why we say, first step, physically remove as much of that as you can, so you can change the balance of power in the system. So what you can do, instead of maybe treating, what you can keep at bay, it is one thing you'll notice with the gels is the inside of your tank, the glass or plastic of your tank, will stay much cleaner, where you're not having to use the cleaning sponge or the cleaning magnet so often, because the front, just those surfaces are so much cleaner. And you should have a much better handle on the nitrates and phosphates without having to do water changes all the time. The system should be in balance by having the bacteria coming out of the gel into the system. Now, some people like to combine, everything. They want GFO and they want, ketomorpha and this and that. And you really have to choose your system here. The biggest gel goes up to 100 gallons, and you can combine 2 to 200 gallons. When you get above those sizes, the gels work, but maybe there's something else you want to do in your system. And especially though, if you have a system that's hard to have a skimmer, or a smaller system, because the small gels, go down to bowl size. They're very convenient to be consuming those nutrients and turning them into bacteria, rather than letting the cyanobacteria and the dinos and the hair algae. So it should keep at bay cyano and dino and hair algae, and that slimy feeling on the inside of the glass. All that should be kept at bay with the gels.
All right, that's good to know. And I know we've talked about this, and you mentioned it before earlier in this podcast. It is if you get the ones that say reef safe, it is reef safe. It is safe for seahorses, safe for anemones, reef safe.
Right. They're 100% natural. The plastic is recycled plastic that's used. So we're trying to be environmentally conscious there. And it is all recyclable. So you can recycle the cartridges, and the gel
Yes.
itself is 100% natural product. The bacteria, of course, are 100%. And no, they're not genetically engineered. And yes, that is a question we get more than you think. We do not sell genetically engineered bacteria.
No, I think I'm glad you brought up that they are made from recycled materials and they are recyclable. You can actually see that on another one of the things that's on the packaging, but I think that's really cool. It's exciting to see that, coming from a hobbyist perspective, it's exciting to see that companies are trying to maybe change the way that they do things and take that in mind. And, if they can be a little bit more sustainable, to go that direction. So it's always makes me happy to see.
Yeah. The technology's there, and companies just have the responsibility to start using it. Everything in the package can be recycled, and everywhere we can, and we find recycled products or materials to make our packaging, and that's what we're looking for, because it's just the right thing to do. Especially, we all have aquariums because they're beautiful, but I think in the back of our minds, we want to do what's good for the environment, and it's not a problem to do that with this these days. There's lots of technology out there that allows us to use as much else as we can.
Yep. All right. Now I've got one last thing that I want to touch on today. We have a huge variety of WasteAway gels. It's not just, one for fresh water and one for salt water. We've got a bunch of different WasteAway gels for all types of tanks. So would you want to go over some of the different types that?
Right. Well, as we started out, we talked about that this is a convenience factor. And so think of some situations where it's hard to clean, like a bettable. How do you change water without taking the fish out and all the water and upsetting everything? Well, we have a gel just for bettables. Plants. Now, we first brought this out. I've sent it to some friends who have big plant tanks, and they were like, my plants are looking great. Why is that? Well, what happens is the bacteria are taking those organics and they're breaking those organics down into ammonia and carbon dioxide. Well, what do you fertilize your plants with? Ammonia and carbon dioxide. So we have a plant one that you can put into the system, and it's not going to steal all your nutrients. It's basically going to break down organics, which then are recycled by the plant. That's nature's filter in many cases, and it helps them get with nutrients so they look better. Shrimp tanks. Now, shrimp tanks generally don't have a lot of filtration, and they also can have special soils and the branching and things, and you can get stuff growing on these over time. So we have a special gel just for freshwater shrimp tanks. So bettas and shrimps and plants, and then turtles. If you've ever had the red-eared sliders of the turtles, I mean, those tanks, they can get pretty sour smelling, and
turtle tanks are some of the nastiest
go all through the house. Right. So we have a gel that's just for the turtle tanks to get rid of, break down that turtle waste and break down that organic material so that it smells better and the water's clear. So those are 4 different types of gels that we have.
All right, that's good to know. Again, I've cleaned turtle tanks before. They're disgusting. So if you're listening to this and you've used these gels in a turtle tank, take a photo and send it to me. I will happily share it on our social media page. I want to know that you're being successful and might not be as gross for you after you use them.
Yes, and definitely will cut down on the smell.
Can you make one of these for my pig's breath? He's got terrible breath.
Wonder, probably. I don't, little what are those mints that little strips you put on your tongue to clean your breath.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, you'll have to come up with a name, but I think we can do that.
we could like totally expand this for pigs, dogs, all animals.
All those animals. There you go. Yep. So.
All right. Well, that's all of the questions that I've got for you. I think we covered most of the common things that, when people have questions about these WasteAway gels, those, we've covered, I think, all of them that I usually see.
Yeah, those are the common ones. And you just use the right size. Don't break it out of the cartridge. Definitely unwrap the shrink wrap. And don't worry about if a little bit of biofilm comes out. It's all good. Yep. They're very convenient and easy.
Exactly. And if you do have questions and stuff that we haven't covered, feel free to send us a message. You can also reach out to us on any of our social media platforms. We monitor those. You can send us an email as well, and we will happily respond to your questions.
Thanks, everybody. This has been Dr. Tim and Hilary, a Dr. Tim's Aquatics podcast, and we'll talk to you again next week. Thanks.